My name is Belma Bertrand, and I'm 28 years old. I stood at the edge of the ballroom in a dress I'd bought off the clearance rack 3 years earlier, nursing a glass of sparkling water because I couldn't afford to drink and then have to explain why I wasn't ordering food when the server circled back. The chandeliers overhead cast a soft gold light across 200 guests, all dressed like they belonged there. My sister Charlotte glowed at the center of it all, laughing at something her fiancé's mother had said, her ring catching the light every time her hand moved. I hadn't wanted to come. I'd nearly called my mother the night before to say I had a shift I couldn't get out of. But Charlotte had asked me herself, in that soft voice she only used when she truly meant something, and I couldn't say no to her. She was the one person in my family who never made me feel like an afterthought. The rest of them were a different story. I work as a custodian at a private medical clinic downtown. I mop floors, empty trash bins, disinfect rooms after hours. It's steady work. It pays my rent and keeps food in my fridge. And there is nothing in this world that makes me ashamed of it. But my parents have never seen it that way. To them, I was the daughter who never finished her degree, the daughter who settled, the daughter who made them wince every time someone at church asked what their girls were up to. I was standing near the dessert table when my mother spotted me and waved me over with 2 fingers, the way you'd summon a waiter. Her arm was looped through the elbow of an older man I didn't recognize, silver-haired, sharp gray suit, the kind of quiet composure that told you he was used to being the most important person in any room he entered. Charlotte had mentioned him before, her fiancé's father, a man named Desmond Ashcraft, who apparently owned half the commercial property on the east side of the city. Desmond, I want you to meet someone, my mother said, pulling me forward by the wrist before I could arrange my face into something neutral. This is my other daughter. Desmond extended his hand, warm and polite. It's lovely to meet you. My mother didn't let the moment breathe. She flashed that bright, brittle smile she reserved for exactly these situations, the one that always came right before she said something designed to put me in my place without ever raising her voice. Oh, this is my other daughter, she said. She cleans floors for a living. Heat crawled up my neck before I even had time to process it. A few nearby guests glanced over, then looked quickly away, the way people do when they've witnessed something a little too raw for a party. My father, standing just behind her with a drink in hand, let out a short laugh and shook his head, as if this were simply an amusing little footnote about our family. Every family's got one, he said. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I'd spent years building a wall around moments like this, learning how to smile through them, how to let the words slide off instead of sink in. But standing there in front of strangers, in front of Charlotte's future in-laws, something in me went very still and very quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before you stop caring what anyone thinks of you. I looked up to see how Desmond had reacted, bracing for the usual, a polite, uncomfortable smile, maybe a quick change of subject to spare everyone the awkwardness. Instead, his expression had shifted entirely. The warmth was gone. He wasn't looking at my mother anymore. He was staring down at my hand, at the glass of water I still held, at the pale, thin scar running across my left palm. His face went completely still. Whatever polite mask he'd worn for the party dissolved in an instant, replaced by something I couldn't quite name, recognition, maybe, or disbelief, as if he'd just seen a ghost standing in a rented ballroom in a clearance rack dress. My mother kept talking, saying something about how someone has to do that kind of work, I suppose. But Desmond wasn't listening to her anymore. His eyes stayed fixed on my hand as if the rest of the room had gone silent around him. Then, slowly, he set his glass down on the table beside him. He straightened, buttoned his jacket out of old habit, and turned to me with an expression I couldn't read, careful, deliberate, like a man choosing his next words with far more weight than the moment seemed to call for. Could I speak with you outside? My mother's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered it, laughing lightly as if this were nothing, as if a wealthy stranger hadn't just quietly excused himself from a conversation to speak privately with the daughter she'd just humiliated in front of 200 people. I set my glass down on the table, my hand trembling slightly, though I couldn't have told you if it was from embarrassment or something else entirely. I had no idea what he wanted. I had no idea why a man I'd met 30 seconds earlier was staring at a scar I hadn't thought about in years as if it meant something to him. But I followed him toward the door anyway, out into the cool night air, my heart pounding harder with every step. Want me to keep going and draft what happens next, or adjust the tone/pacing anywhere in this section? Because some part of me already knew that whatever he was about to say would change everything I thought I understood about my own life. The cool air outside hit my skin like a slap after the heat of the ballroom, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Desmond walked a few steps ahead of me across the stone terrace, past a row of potted olive trees strung with small white lights, until we were far enough from the doors that the music and chatter behind us faded into a low hum. Then he turned to face me, and up close, under the moonlight, he looked older than he had inside, as if the last 30 seconds had aged him. "That scar," he said quietly, nodding toward my left hand. "Where did you get it?" I turned my palm over instinctively, as if I needed to check it was still the same scar I'd carried for 11 years. "I was 16, I said. There was a fire at an apartment building near where I grew up. I helped pull a little boy out through a kitchen window. Cut my hand pretty badly on the broken glass." Desmond's jaw tightened. He looked away from me for a second, out toward the dark garden, and when he looked back, his eyes were glassy in a way I hadn't expected from a man who, 10 minutes earlier, had seemed like he owned every room he walked into. "His name was Theo," he said. "Small for his age. 7 years old. Curly hair. Wouldn't stop asking about his stuffed rabbit while the paramedics checked him over." My chest went tight. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade, but I remembered the boy, remembered his voice, remembered him crying for something he'd left behind in a burning apartment while I held a dish towel against my bleeding hand. "That was your grandson," I said slowly, understanding arriving in pieces. "My son," Desmond said. "I adopted Theo when he was 3, after his parents passed. He's 27 now. Works in urban planning, if you can believe that. Says growing up in that building taught him more about housing safety than any textbook ever could." He let out a breath that was half laugh, half something heavier. "I spent years trying to find the girl who pulled him out that window. The fire department report just said unidentified minor, declined to give full details, left before ambulance arrived. I hired someone to look, twice, and both times it went nowhere. I'd given up on ever finding you. And then I walk into my son's engagement party and see a scar I've stared at in old photographs for 11 years, sitting on the hand of the woman my future daughter-in-law's mother just introduced as an embarrassment. I didn't know what to say. I remembered leaving that night without giving my name to anyone, because I hadn't wanted my parents to know I'd been anywhere near that building. They'd have been furious I was out that late, furious I'd put myself in danger for a stranger's kid. It had been easier to disappear into the crowd and let the paramedics handle it. I'd never thought about that decision again. I certainly never imagined it would follow me into a ballroom 11 years later. "You didn't have to run into a burning building for a child you'd never met," Desmond said. "But you did. And I have spent over a decade wanting to thank the person who did that. Tonight I found her standing in a room full of people who don't seem to understand what she's actually made of." My eyes stung, and I blinked hard, refusing to let myself cry in front of a man I'd just met. "I'm not looking for anything," I said. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I want to do something anyway." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, pressing it into my hand, folding my fingers over it gently, right over the scar. "Come by my office this week." "Not for charity. I run 3 property management companies and a small foundation that funds trade and vocational scholarships. I've watched good, hard-working people get overlooked their entire lives because somebody decided their job wasn't impressive enough to matter. I don't make that mistake twice, not with someone who saved my son's life." When we walked back inside, my mother was watching the door with a tight, curious smile, clearly trying to read what had just happened. Desmond walked straight past her, took my hand, the scarred one, and raised it slightly for the whole table to see, right in front of my parents, in front of Charlotte, in front of everyone who'd laughed a few minutes earlier. This woman, he said, his voice carrying further than he probably intended, saved my son's life 11 years ago. Ran into a burning building for a boy she'd never met, and asked for nothing in return. I don't think there's a single person in this room who's done something braver. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My mother's smile disappeared completely. My father set his glass down as if it had suddenly gotten too heavy to hold. Charlotte crossed the room and hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my balance, whispering that she'd always known there was more to me than our parents ever let anyone see. I didn't say much for the rest of the night. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I wasn't the daughter being explained away in a corner. I was standing in the middle of the room, and everyone was finally looking at me the way I'd always wanted to be seen, not for what I did for a living, but for who I actually was underneath. Want me to combine both parts into one clean file, or keep refining further?